Why do civilizations emerge in some places and not others? Historian Arnold Toynbee thought that the usual answers, climate, environment, resources, were too narrow. Rather, something called challenge and response was the answer. To build a civilization, you must make it struggle. Toynbee was an English historian who published the 12-volume masterwork, A Study of History, which traced the life cycle of about 24 civilizations. Rather than simply naming events and dates, though, Toynbee built a framework for world history. Popular in the 1940s and 50s, his work has largely fallen out of academic favor, but it remains a significant contribution to the philosophy of history. Most notably, his theory of challenge and response provides a model for the rise of civilizations. More mainstream models of the genesis of high cultures usually give credit to favorable climates or access to natural resources. They provide materialistic answers to why some societies flourish and others fall. An often cited reason for the birth of early civilizations in Mesopotamia, such as the Sumerians and Babylonians, and the long-lasting dynasties in Egypt, is their proximity to the equator, which allowed for predictable weather patterns and easy access to water. These characteristics allowed for agricultural development and resulted in well-fed populations, who then had time and energy to devote to the development of art, written language, trading, and leisure. Though conducive climate and available resources can be a part of what makes a thriving culture, they are not, however, universal aspects of high cultures. Toynbee's challenge and response thus takes a more principled approach and considers many civilizations across history, seeking to find the link that can be applied to all. Toynbee determined it was more about the inward character of a culture than its external attributes. Toynbee claimed civilization was the result of an encounter between a culture and a unique challenge. This challenge could be difficult terrain, a new environment, pressures from other civilizations militarily or economically, or penalization. The challenge is an unpredictable threat the society has not faced before, and failure to react to the threat might mean cultural death, defeat by conquest, economic collapse, starvation, etc. But challenges are not necessarily negative. Within each challenge is an opportunity for new growth. A culture has a chance to answer the challenge in a way that will overcome the threat and lead to prosperity. This is the response aspect of Toynbee's model. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, Toynbee did not view this interaction as a singular occurrence. Rather, challenge and response was a continual process, where, as new threats are posed, a culture must constantly innovate new responses to deal with them. In this way, a civilization develops from a repeated push and pull, an eternal struggle between external forces, often nature, and a society's ingenuity. Like yin and yang, civilizations emerge from the interplay between these two competing forces. Toynbee details the birth of the Attic culture as a prime example of an ascendant civilization that responded well to its challenges. In the case of Athens, it was difficult terrain, or hard country, that initially stimulated it toward growth. Toynbee claims the once fertile pastures of Attica dried up, forcing the Athenians to search for new ways of living beyond farming. In an effort to adapt, the Athenians made olive cultivation their new livelihood, and what followed was an economic explosion. Toynbee writes, "To make a living from the produce of the olive groves, the Athenian had to pack his Attic oil into jars and ship it overseas and exchange it on the Scythian market for grain, necessities which called into the existence the Attic potteries and the Attic merchant marine, and also, since international trades requires a money economy, the Attic silver mines." The booming trade industry required protection from enemies, though, which spurred the militarization of Attic fleets, thus emerging a navy. And once a navy had been commissioned, the Aegean Sea was theirs for the taking. Toynbee points to the initial adversity posed by the hard country as the spark which ignited Attic military supremacy. Thus, the erosion of their soil in Attica stimulated the Athenians to acquire the command of the sea from one end of the Aegean to the other, and beyond. But Athens' military and economic ascension was just the start. The riches gained from their trade and military ventures laid the foundation for a political, artistic, an intellectual tradition which placed Athens and all Greek civilization at the forefront of world culture. In the political sphere, the wealthy merchant population of the city formed the electorate of the Athenian democracy, while naval supremacy provided a framework for the military alliance of city-states constituting the Delian League. Artistically, the need for Athenian pottery to ship and store goods created a medium for vase painters to hone their craft. And Attica's dry climate meant trees were scarce, leading architects and sculptors to use stone rather than wood as their chosen material. Thus, stone temples and sculptures. Finally, Athens became a center of intellectual and philosophical discourse due to it serving as the focal point of all other Hellenic city-states. Its trade and military supremacy ensured that it was the cultural hub of the region, bringing in ideas from all over. Athens' initial struggle to survive in a difficult climate forced new innovations, but also brought new challenges that weren't present before. Thus, the Athenians were forced to contend, one after the other, with dynamic threats that they adapted to and overcame. Their ascendancy perfectly illustrates how a successful civilization endures Toynbee's cycles of challenge and response. It is not a one-time event, but an endless series of challenges that continually confront a culture. Besides hard country, there are other stimuli that might conceive new civilizations. One of the greatest challenges embryonic cultures face is that of other civilizations. Often, a budding culture undergoes persecution or penalization. Toynbee used the example of the nonconformist Protestants in 17th century England, who did not follow the Church of England's practices and doctrines. Sects like the Puritans, responding to the challenge of persecution, fled for the New World. With no more support than their own courage and vision, they ventured into unknown lands and wrestled a new nation from the wilderness, setting up outposts which eventually became the first American colonies. Thus, their daring response to persecution in their own country birthed an entirely new civilization. We've seen how cultures can successfully navigate the challenges posed to them, but what of unsuccessful ones? What happens when a culture fails to respond to the multitude of difficulties which oppose its prosperity? Toynbee notes that civilizations who develop beyond primitive society do so because they face challenges that are a golden mean of difficulty. They're neither too hard nor too easy. But when civilizations encounter obstacles far beyond their capabilities, they become either 1, abortive, or 2, arrested. An abortive civilization is straightforward. It is either destroyed completely or absorbed into a larger civilization. The first case is obvious. Conquest eliminates the culture from the world stage. The second case is when a culture is enslaved or becomes a vassal of another. The Nestorian Christian sect of the 7th century, which Toynbee claimed could have developed into a Far Eastern Christian civilization, serves as an example. Though relatively unknown today, they were a rising culture based around trade of the Northern Silk Road. Toynbee details how the future was initially promising for the Nestorians. All the local conditions in the area appeared to be in favor of the genesis of a new civilization there. There had been a long and thorough intermingling of cultures. The concentration of the sedentary inhabitants into a number of separate fortified oases had resulted in a number of politically independent but economically and culturally interconnected city-states. To these beneficial human and physical conditions was added the religious stimulus of a vigorous Nestorianism. Thus, in the middle of the 7th century of the Christian era, the new embryonic civilization had every prospect of coming to birth. But the Arab invasion of the early 8th century threatened their all-important trade routes, and they were given a choice between complete economic annihilation and political servitude. Choosing peaceful vassalage, the Nestorians were absorbed into the Arab Empire, resigning them to obscurity. Toynbee writes, "Their acquiescence in being incorporated into an alien universal state had the inevitable effect of stifling the embryo of their own civilization. The last fate for a culture that fails to overcome threats is arrestment. A civilization that attempts some extraordinary tour de force may find itself not defeated outright, but arrested in a state of immobility, its energy wholly absorbed in meeting the single great challenge. Arrestment is essentially a stagnation. The culture is not destroyed, but it fails to innovate beyond a certain point, militarily, economically, and artistically. Usually this is due to an extremely difficult challenge that it spends all its energy attempting to overcome. The Central Asian nomads were one such culture, according to Toynbee. Their difficult environment posed an almost insurmountable challenge, and the struggle to overcome it required all of their energy and spirit, leaving none left over for innovation. He writes, "The Central Asian nomads were condemned to this fate. They successfully mastered the problem of adaptation to the harsh exigencies of life on the steppes, but in doing so they became the slaves of their environment, unable to make any fresh creative advance. So we've reviewed the possibilities of a culture confronted with difficult challenges. It can ascend through a series of innovations propelling it toward higher civilization. It can be completely destroyed via conquest or absorbed into a host civilization, or it can stagnate." Toynbee's philosophy differed from other historians because he did not attribute materialistic causation to the genesis of civilizations. And unlike fellow philosopher of history Oswald Spengler, his theory was not deterministic. Every society had the chance to develop into a high culture if it made the right choices. Finally, all of this leaves us with the questions. Where are we now? Which path has Western civilization taken? It's clear that the genesis of our civilization has already come about. The exact moment, of course, depends on one's definition of Western civilization. One could start with the Greeks, or the spread of Christianity, or find threads of our culture in both. Nonetheless, Western civilization was born at some point and has grown. It faced challenges like Islamic expansionism in the 8th and 9th centuries, the Reformation which split its religion in two, and more recently, ideological and strategic battles like the Cold War. Toynbee, writing in 1939, argued the great challenge of Western civilization was now one of unification. The challenge of being called upon to create a political world order, the framework for an economic world order, now confronts our modern Western society. I'm not sure his call for this type of world order really holds up today, though. Many other great challenges confront us more than half a century later. Battles over immigration, trade and foreign policy, and emerging AI. How we respond to these challenges will determine whether we grow, die, or stagnate. Only time and the decisions we make now will reveal our destiny. Thanks for watching this video. If you'd like more, please like and subscribe, and consider joining our Patreon or our Substack community to join our mission of highlighting the truth and beauty of Western civilization. Links below, and catch you next time.